This podcast is brought to you by CMX CVS Media Exchange, celebrating 5 years of real shopper insights driving real brand wins. For 5 years, CMX has built personalized one-to-one interactions between brands and over 90 million addressable Extra Care members based on real customer behavior. With CMX, performance isn't just about impressions, it's about impact, ensuring that every campaign delivers on brand goals. Unlock your brand's next opportunity at cvsmediaexchange.com. CMX. It's not guessing, it's data.
Hi, I'm Adrienne Pasquarelli, Special Projects Editor and Senior Reporter at Ad Age, and welcome to another edition of the Marketer's Brief podcast, our weekly discussion about marketing news and trends that have the industry buzzing. There are many dating apps out there, but few are resonating with Gen Z as much as Hinge, which has built a brand based on authentic connections through purpose-driven marketing. In fact, Hinge is one of the best performing brands in the portfolio of Parent Match Group and reported quarterly revenue growth of 25% earlier this month. Today, we'll be talking with Jackie Jantos, President and Chief Marketing Officer at Hinge. She'll discuss how Hinge pursues a with, not for, design and marketing approach to its target Gen Z audience and breaks down the strategy behind Hinge's second chapter of its recent It's Funny We Met on Hinge campaign. Now here's my conversation with Jackie. Hi, Jackie. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Let's start by talking a bit about your career journey. I know you've worked at a variety of brands, including Coca-Cola and Spotify, and now you've been at Hinge for almost 4 years. How did you end up at the company?
I have found myself at the intersection really of technology, global brands, and youth culture for most of my career. And I am very motivated by learning about what's happening with where the world is going and how young people are often changing how we live and think and the relationships we're in and connect and all of it. And so I've just eternally been fascinated in global insights and local market insights and insights around how people interact. And I've navigated towards this brand, probably not surprisingly, because it literally sits at the intersection of all those things. And also, I happen to also have met my own partner on a dating app. And so I think I'm a very values-centered person. And so navigating towards a space that I feel really passionate about has also been a through line in the places I've been.
And you have a unique dual role as president and CMO, and that's pretty rare in the ad industry, right? But maybe helpful in terms of things like decision making. What are your responsibilities in this expanded leadership role?
Yeah, it is definitely rare. And I think if you're sitting in a brand like ours and a category like ours, and you're thinking about next generation audiences and how technology is evolving, you have to be eternally curious about cultural and consumer insight. And bringing that work into marketing is meaningful. Bringing that type of thinking into product development is almost even more meaningful. And so I think it makes a lot of sense in this type of category for me to be able to help share everything that we're learning that marketers pay attention to at the highest altitude so the whole organization can orient around how we build a product that is deeply in service of next generation daters. And so I see my role less as impacting decision making because we have an incredible team here, an incredible product and tech leader and team, more in impacting the types of insights that come into the organization that help us iterate our product and in doing so iterate how we go to market.
Well, let's talk about some of those ways that you are going to market and specifically the ways that Hinge is finding its edge. We recently spotlighted the brand in Ad Age in our Hottest Brands report as an example of one dating app that's really resonating at a time when other dating apps may be struggling a bit to grow. The brand reported quarterly revenue growth of 25% earlier this month. Why do you think Hinge is seeing this success?
Yeah, Hinge is a very values-driven organization. And in many ways, we focus a lot on how we can be useful to this next generation of daters. And so we are meeting them in places where they're already having discussion about relationships. That's one part of it. And the other part of it is we have this principle at Hinge, with, not for. And this means we're designing our marketing programs and our product with the audience that we are hoping to serve, not just for them on the sidelines. So when we look around the room at Hinge with anything we're developing, we say, do we have enough representation in the room to do justice in this work for this particular audience? And if we don't, then we bring more representation in. We have an incredibly diverse and inclusive team within the organization, and especially within the marketing team. And that has been a really powerful way for us to engage this next generation audience in a way that's deeply credible, highly authentic, and with a lot of care.
That's interesting because it's happening, a push like that or a focus like that comes at a time when so many brands are pulling back on diversity and inclusion in their executive ranks, in their marketing. It's also interesting kind of that you're designing with this group and not for. And when you talk about who your target is that mostly Gen Z, or do you guys also kind of resonate with a variety of ages?
Yeah, we've been engaging Gen Z quite specifically over the past 3.5, 4 years. And while we also serve a slightly older millennial audience, our user base has both grown a lot over the past time period, but also grown a lot with Gen Z. So actually, they represent over half of our monthly active users right now. And what's interesting is that our employee base at Hinge and our user base are sort of one and the same, which is really interesting and remarkable as well.
That's really helpful in terms of giving you valuable insights on what your customer is looking for.
That's right.
So, how are you using marketing to continue some of the momentum that Hinge has seen recently?
Yeah, I think I mentioned showing up in channels where our audience are. Dating has really always been really hard. It's not easy, and it can put you in a space that can make you feel uncomfortable or lacking confidence. So, for us, we're acutely tuned into how this generation is feeling right now. This is also a generation that is experiencing acute levels of isolation and feelings of loneliness. And a lot of this comes from the increasing time spent on technology and the decreasing time spent in person with others. And so, from the content that we're putting out there, we try to highlight Hinge couples in ways that really honor the diversity of relationships and how they start and what they look like in their early phases, which can be very different than what you see in pop culture with sort of celebrity news and sort of these idealistic relationships. And we also focus on ways in which we can encourage this audience to come together in person through things like our social impact programs, because just encouraging people to meet in person is really important. It's feeling harder than ever for this generation. And ultimately, our goal as an organization is to get people off the app and into a date. So we have to thread this needle of how we show up for an audience that is longing to be in relationship, but struggling to get there, is longing to be connecting in person, but is struggling to show up in those spaces. And really, there are so many ways we think about how our brand can support this generation in doing all of that.
Now, Hinge just came out with the second chapter of its Funny We Met on Hinge campaign. Can you talk a bit about the background of that campaign, how you came up with the idea for it, and then we'll get into some of the other aspects?
Sure. A lot of people know us for the line, the dating app designed to be deleted. And really, all of the work we do ladders up to this ultimate objective of helping people get off the app and into dates. So that's what we measure both for the success of our product experience. And that is the general orientation for all of the work that we put into market. So it's funny we met on Hinge is really a body of content now in its second chapter that is honoring the diversity of stories of people who met on our app. And what's funny about it is that a lot of people's lives had crossed in real life, either known to them or unknown to them before they actually met on Hinge. So it's intended to honor the sort of messiness of early phases of a relationship, and also how there's a bit of serendipity in how people might meet, and really showcase that everyone's start point is a little bit different and unique to them. And we also hope to encourage people to keep trying. Some of these stories unfolded in ways that were just so unpredictable. And so to try and to keep an open mind about what that might look like for you.
How did you find the couples that you featured? And are any of them any of your employees?
That's a funny question. We have a lot of ways where people can share with us that they met their partner on Hinge and share their story. And we also receive a lot of unsolicited wedding invitations, move-in notices, thank you letters, really all of it. Having met my own partner on a dating app, I know that the gratitude you feel for this that helped you find a partner in your life is pretty profound and sticks with you. So we have both a proactive outreach, and also when we go into making work like this, we reach out to a broad swath of folks, both to gauge interest in participating here and to do some casting so that we can have a variety of relationships represented and people represented in our storytelling. And then, the real magic is when we connect the team building out this content with the couples themselves and hearing their story and including them in ways on set that allows them to be willing to share with us in a way that feels comfortable for them. It's really this craft in extracting people's unique stories in a way that feels honest and true. We know that when you're deeply insightful and deeply honest, you're going to connect with this generation because they are looking for that in sort of all aspects of their lives.
It's interesting that you decided to do a second chapter of the campaign because it feels like something brands are often grappling with a lot when to do a second iteration or when to do something brand new. Can you talk a bit about that process to know that this was something that you wanted to return to and what metrics you used to measure the success of that first chapter?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the line, the dating app designed to be deleted, and the general structure around that creative strategy has been in place before even I arrived at Hinge. In some ways, I think there is a lot to be said for recognizing when something is working and sticking with it. There's learning that comes each iteration over iteration. And oftentimes in marketing, especially, there's this instinct and desire to create new things. When you actually have something that's working, the ability to make it work harder and to become more ingrained in people's lives over time is a really powerful sort of shortcut, if you will, to continuously trying new things. So we love a good chapter 2, chapter 3. We also just released chapter 2 of No Ordinary Love, which is a different way of telling love stories tactically. So I think for us, we're always looking at engagement with the brand. We look at brand consideration and we see a jumps in that year over year. We're also looking at top of line growth, so registrations. And when we're seeing positive signal across the board on everything that we're watching, and we just know instinctively this work feels right for our audience, it feels right for content being put into the world right now, and it feels right for the state of this category, we just make the choice to double down and try a second chapter, a third chapter, and try new things to see how far we can spread the content and what other needles we can sort of thread through additional partners or additional formats or additional media spaces, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of our work is highly experimental. And I think when you know a program generally is working, the ability to add more experimental layers, chapter over chapter, becomes the most exciting part, and the most exciting part for the creative people doing the work.
Right, kind of amplifying, adding more ideas for engagement rather than reinventing the wheel.
Exactly. And, you'll notice it's funny, we met on Hinge. We're also working with our director. We're working with our creative director externally. So in many ways, this whole team came together for this second chapter, which, we were able to use all of the learnings and wisdom from the first time around to elevate the work even more.
And your ad agency is Birthday, right? How long have you guys worked with them? And is that an AOR relationship?
Yeah, and we work with a lot of creative partners. So Karina Falusi, who is, the founder of Birthday, is a longtime creative collaborator who I've worked with in a variety of capacities. And Karina has done quite a bit of work for us. She's done some design to be deleted work with her Birthday team for our European markets and has also done now this, it's funny, we met on Hinge work for our core English speaking markets. But we do work with a variety of partners. We don't have an agency of record per se. We have some creative teams and individuals in house. We have an incredible executive creative director here at Hinge, Ola Sobieski. And Ola also brings in partners across the board for different types of engagement. So it's very experimental in its approach as well, I would say.
Let's take a quick break for this message from our sponsor.
This podcast is brought to you by CMX CVS Media Exchange. CMX enables brands to engage with high-intent shoppers across the full path to purchase, from digital inspiration to in-aisle activation. With 2 billion on-site impressions, nearly 2,000 digital screens in-store, and the ability to reach shoppers through first-to-market collaborations with industry-leading publishers and networks, CMX is leading the next chapter in retail media. Discover more at cvsmediaexchange.com. CMX. It's not guessing, it's data.
Welcome back. Now, I know Hinge is also working on social impact work as a way of connecting with Gen Z, and you alluded to that a little earlier in the conversation. Can you talk about the investment in this with the One More Hour initiative?
One More Hour is a social impact platform we stood up a few years ago. And at the core of it is a set of grants. When we launched the program, we announced $1 million of funding that was provided to a number of social clubs and groups that essentially are serving the needs of Gen Z and bringing Gen Z together in person. So everything from reading rhythm to intersection surf, there's a variety of social clubs that have already been stood up by incredible founders who aim to bring together people back in person. And so really our work there is to just support those groups and support the work that those founders are doing. And importantly, a lot of the connection being created there is platonic. These are not groups created for romantic relationships. They're really just created to get some community back out together in public spaces. And we love that because that is a stepping stone to feeling comfortable to meeting up with someone you met on Hinge in a date.
Do you have any advice for other brands that are also thinking about pursuing these kinds of socially driven, purpose driven initiatives?
I do. I think it's really important to be offering value in a space that makes sense both for what your product is oriented to do. So for us, in-person dates is critical to our product. And so it's absolutely connected to our business that we would want to encourage people to meet in person and help support their needs in doing that. So that taps to the second piece, which is being really useful to your audience. It can't just be about you standing for something. It needs to be about you providing some support that is useful to people that you're trying to engage. And then, I would say sustainability and consistency is really important. This is a program that we're building year over year. And the relationships that we build along the way help us fine tune the program to work better for our audience. So you really do need to be putting your energy into the actual actions that you aim to create, not just sort of these fictitious rhetorical programs. There has to be an actual real program in support of the group underneath it all.
And speaking of other brands, are there any that you're paying attention to as examples of marketers that are doing a good job of connecting with Gen Z? I mean, what marketing are you most excited about that you've seen lately?
Oh my goodness. I have to tell you, I spend more of my time waiting around with diverse individuals with unique lived experiences beyond that of my own and learning about what is engaging and motivating to them. And a lot of these social groups and clubs and a lot of the emerging platforms like Substack, these are the places that I go to get inspired by new ways to connect with young people. And not surprisingly, there aren't a ton of brands in those spaces yet. We live in a world where some of the brands that gain the most publicity and media exposure are the ones that are the most scaled in terms of the size of their business and the dollars they have to orient towards marketing programs. And those just don't often end up being the spaces to look for inspiration if you're trying to do things that are deeply credible and relevant in a with, not for, a principled way with Gen Z.
Interesting and telling. And then as we look to the future, we've been talking at Ad Age a lot about what's around the corner, what the next 10 years will look like. And I'm wondering if there are any marketing tools that you're using today that you think will be obsolete in the next, 5 to 10 years as we see tech advancements like AI.
Oh my goodness. I think one of the things I really had to learn when I transitioned from my role at Coke to my role at Spotify, and again had to learn as I transitioned to my role at Hinge, is you kind of have to shake off a lot of the structure and tools and acknowledge that every business is unique. Every audience you're trying to engage is unique, especially whatever product you're building that is offering value to them is also unique. So in some ways, I say this and, I say it with kind of a bit of a grain of salt, but we're all just making it up. The tools are here and they often provide some guidance and some structure, and they're absolutely valuable. And the world is changing at such a fast clip. Channels are changing. AI is changing everything. How we interact with each other and technology is changing. Where oftentimes I think of some of the existing tools, for example, brand trackers, they provide some signal, but I think a lot of the signal is really coming more from surrounding yourself with people from different backgrounds, with different experiences, and looking above at where culture is going writ large and paying closer attention to the value people are or are not getting from the products and experiences around them, and sort of beginning to question what can offer more value in the future. I'm a big fan of really engaging as deeply as I can with a variety of different people so that I'm not stuck in my own sort of echo chamber bubble, or even just marketing community in and of itself, and not paying attention to what's happening in different spaces where, there's a closer proximity to where change is coming from. Right now, AI is obviously changing everything. And this desire to introduce all of these companion AI tools for each individual is really fascinating for me. And it's also a void of the type of complexity in a relationship that you would develop with another human, where there's conflict and you're kind of figuring out who you are along the journey of creating a relationship with someone else. AI right now is very affirming of who an individual is, and it creates a very easy experience. It feels like it's easy to hook into that space and kind of stay there for a long time. And so I just look more generally at some of these tools and try to put myself into the new tools and use them as quickly and as frequently as I can for all aspects of my life to learn. And therein, I think, lies where marketers need to be. We need to be in the channels that are being offered to the next generation of audiences in order to better understand how they're working and to imagine how they might be developing people as humans who are still growing, and think about how to provide value around those spaces. I know that's an incredibly long-winded answer, but I get a lot of value out of trying to live differently, leveraging all of these new technologies, more so than looking at any marketing tools per se.
Great answer. And we are actually out of time. Jackie, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. It's been fun to chat.
That was Jackie Jantos, President and Chief Marketing Officer at Hinge, and I'm Adrienne Pasquarelli, Special Projects Editor and Senior Reporter at Ad Age. I'd like to thank our producer, Lauren Ciardio, and invite you to subscribe to the Marketer's Brief podcast on your favorite player. We promise to keep it brief, or at least short enough for your morning coffee. Thanks for tuning in.
Marketer's Brief listeners get $40 off an adage.com subscription. Sharpen your marketing edge and visit adage.com/brief for your discount.